All right, and let's go to the phones. Looks like we have none other than Mr. Bob Suren coming up live on the phone right now. Hey, Bob, how's it going, bud?
Hey, how are you doing?
Once again, I appreciate you taking the time tonight to chat with us about your book that's coming out shortly, Crate Digger, An Obsession with Punk Records. Now, you put this book together and you are releasing it soon. Do you have a release date yet?
Microcosm Publishing is the publisher. You can go to microcosmpublishing.com and place pre-order. It will ship out, I believe, on June 1st. They're already taking sales. They say the advanced sales are already good. You can buy it from microcosmpublishing.com. You can buy it from Amazon. You can buy it from Books A Million. People in Europe can buy it from a place called Lovely Books. People in Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Rim countries can buy it from a place called Fish Pond. So it's going to be everywhere.
That's very awesome. So, Bob, this book that you put out, it's a retrospective of 30 years of your life as told through punk rock records such as, the Dead Boys and Sex Pistols and local bands and bands that even that you played in yourself. One of my favorite stories when I was reading the book was how you guys broke into a house to record. And to me, I thought Bob, that's going to be one of the most punk rock things I've ever heard in my entire life. Can you kind of verbally tell me that story a little bit depth more than just a little bit in the chapter?
I was in this band, and it occurred to me that we could make a record. And to make a record, we had to record first. And we had a friend who had some very primitive recording equipment, and we just needed to find a place to record this record. I knew it was going to be loud, and we probably couldn't do it at any of our folks' house. And there was this house that I knew of that was in a quiet neighborhood that I don't know if it was foreclosed or if the people were trying to sell it, but it was this house that was in nice shape and still had running water and running electricity. And I knew where it was, and we broke in with a screwdriver, and we set up the recording equipment, and we recorded 8 songs as fast as we could, and then we got out of there.
Now, at any point, were you guys just absolutely terrified that the police were already on the way, and they were pissed? I mean, did that kind of help, fuel the fire behind, the energy?
We didn't know what could have happened, but we wanted to get in and out of there as fast as possible. I mean, there was probably, that fear was probably in the back of our minds. To me, punk rock was a mission. It was something that had to be done by any means necessary. And I didn't think that breaking into a house to record a punk record was that big of a risk, considering that the result would be I would have my own band on a piece of vinyl. I always approached punk rock with this all-or-nothing attitude, take no prisoners, and, the ends justify the means. If I have to break into a house to make a record, that's how we're going to get it done. And, at the time, I probably didn't consider the risks as strongly as I would now at 45 years old. And I was 21 or something when we did that, and it just seemed like it was the only way that record was going to get done, so we did it.
It's a great story, man, and I encourage everybody who's listening to pick this book up, Crate Digger. We're speaking with Bob Suren right now. He maybe best known. Bob, what are you best known at? Is it for your record store, for your record distribution, or is it your bands?
People in the Tampa area probably know me from my record store, Sound Idea, that was in Brandon for just a little bit short of 14 years. People internationally probably know me from my mail order company, Sound Idea Distribution. Maybe some people know me from my band's Failure Face and my later band Murder Suicide Pact. Book is I was just completely in love with this genre and this subculture, and I wanted to experience it all. I wanted to have a radio show. I wanted to write about punk, so I had a zine. I wanted to put out punk. I wanted to have a store. I wanted to make T-shirts. I wanted to promote concerts. Any way that I thought I could be involved, I wanted to get involved. I thought that punk rock was more than just a kind of music that you listen to. I thought it was a subculture. And I thought it was a vital subculture with a lot of good ideas behind it. And I wanted to do basically missionary work, if you want to call it that, just to promote, to advance this whole culture of punk rock. I just thought it was a very, very important thing. I thought I was doing important work when I put on shows on Saturday nights. I thought that selling a kid a 7-inch record was an important piece of work. It wasn't just commerce. And I took this passion to almost a fanatical level, so almost a fire and brimstone, like missionary work. And that that kind of single-minded dedication ultimately ended up being detrimental to my personal life. I put way, way more time into being a professional punk rocker, jack of all trades, than I did in being a good husband. And unfortunately, I put my wife on the back burner a lot of time. If I wanted to go on tour, if I wanted to go to a concert, if I had to stay up late to work on a project, I did these things with little consideration to the person that I fell in love with, the person that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And at some point, it drove a wedge between us, and she fell out of love with me. And I largely blame myself. And that's a big theme in the book. It was how I was so devoted to punk rock, I had blinders on, and I didn't see that it was hurting me in other ways.
Sometimes it's be careful what you wish for, because, whatever you want is what you'll get, and you put it out there. You wanted to put on shows, and you wanted to do everything, every aspect of punk rock, the lifestyle, living and breathing, and so it cost you a marriage, and, you still continue on because you have to, and, you look back and you reflect. Do you think in another 30 years, what's the next book going to be about?
I started writing another book. It was about that last year of marriage that was really hard. We separated for 1 year before we signed divorce papers, and a lot of crazy ups and downs happened to me emotionally in that last year. And then after a year of separation, we did sign divorce papers, and I moved to Central America for half a year on my own. And that was exciting. Is about separation and divorce and trying to reinvent myself from scratch. And I wrote about, let's say that I wrote about 80 pages, and I put it down right before I moved to Austin in December of 2013. I haven't picked it back up since then, and every once in a while I pick it up and I look at it, and I think, I don't know if this is something I should put out. There's a lot of very personal stuff in there, and it just really meanders, because I was writing it almost like a journal or a diary. I was writing it as it happened to me. If some terrible thing happened to me or some good thing happened to me every once in a while, I'd write a chapter about it. And taken piece by piece, these are all interesting little chapters. Taken as a whole, it's all over the place because emotionally I was all over the place. If you read it now, it sounds like it was written by a crazy person and not in a good way. So I don't know if that's ever going to come out. Maybe I can trim it down. Maybe I can save it. So I started working on that. I have another collection of punk rock stories that didn't fit into Crate Digger, that just thematically weren't right. I think there might be another book of punk rock stories coming out of me. I have a lot of stories about the record store. A lot of crazy characters came into that record store, and I've been posting some of those on Facebook, and they've been getting a lot of likes and a lot of positive comments. So I think that the next book is already taking place on Facebook. If anybody wants to follow me or be my friend on Facebook, it's Bob Suren. There's another Bob Suren, but he's like in Malaysia, and he races like those import cars, and you can tell which Bob Suren it is. So, you can find me on Facebook, and every once in a while when something occurs to me, I'll post some memory on Facebook, and people seem to enjoy that. And then I started writing another book, a third book that'll probably never come out because it's just a difficult subject. I've been writing some poetry, which poetry is very hard to publish, but I'm having a lot of fun writing it. So right now I have 50, 60 poems, and who knows if anything will ever happen with that, but I'm writing them and I'm enjoying them, and maybe someday that'll be something somebody will want to read from me. But I plan to keep on writing for as long as possible. I want to go around. I want to do some talking and reading gigs too. I think that's going to be the way I express myself for the next several years. It will be through writing and through oration.
That's a very awesome thing to be able to do, and to get there, to be able to take the time that it takes to put the thoughts on paper. You sold your entire punk rock collection, everything that you own, and put it into a backpack, and went to go live in Central America. And since then, I mean, that's a story in itself. Since then, you're in Austin.
Yes. After half a year in Central America and not really making any friends and not seeing any opportunities for work or just general happiness, I had a friend who invited me to come live in Austin. She said, I have a spare bedroom you can rent for me very cheaply. I'll introduce you to my friend. I'll help you find a job. I'll help you buy a car. And I thought, well, it's got to be better than this, because as beautiful as Costa Rica is, I was there all by myself, and there wasn't too much to do besides go to the beach and read books and watch movies online. And I basically spent a lot of time bumming out down there. I traveled all over Costa Rica, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Panama, and I saw some incredible things. but I never found a home. I was traveling around down there not for fun, not for leisure. I was traveling down there looking for a place to fit in. So I was in Central America for half a year, and I traveled all over 4 different countries, and I saw some incredible stuff. And I just never found a city with a lifestyle and the kind of people that I wanted to be around. And it was a real bummer, because that's what I thought I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go somewhere where I didn't know anybody and nobody knew me and just start over from scratch. And I tried it, and nothing came together for me. So I'm back in more familiar territory now. The United States is way more to my liking than Central America was. I'm finding people here to hang out with, people with similar ideologies and similar interests. And Austin has just ended up being a real good fit.
Yeah, the grass is always greener, isn't it, Bob?
Yeah. Yeah, I really thought that I was going to just cut off everybody and everything that I knew and start over from square one. I even played around with the idea of changing my name. I thought when I got to Central America, if I met anybody, I wouldn't even tell them my real name. I had a fake name that I was going to use. And it just never happened. I never found anywhere where I could settle. I don't know how many cities I looked at, but nothing was right.
Tell me what the name was that you were going to use. That if you met somebody, what was that name?
I can't say.
Oh, come on, man!
I might still use it someday. and I do use it like when I don't want to give my name to somebody for real. It's the fake name. I've been using this fake name for like 15 years. And whenever like I fill out a contest form or if they ask for my name, like at Sears or something, this is this fake name that I've been using for a long time. And that was going to be the fake name I'd start over my life with in Central America. But I haven't given it to anybody for real.
We're talking with Bob Suren. He's the author of Crate Digger, An Obsession with Punk Records. So, Bob,
yes.
You have some famous friends in Jello Biafra. How did you come into contact with becoming, to this day, friends with Jello?
Jello contacted me when I put out that first record, the one that was recorded in the house that we had to break into.
That's right. I forgot, and he requested like 5 or 10 copies. Go ahead. Can you tell that story?
Got a really terrible review, and Jello Biafra saw the review and said, I like terrible records. Send me 5 or 10 of your records. And I sent the records to Biafra, and he liked them. And we corresponded, and he was just in Austin a couple of months ago, and I talked to him for a couple of minutes here in Austin. And he's a busy guy. He's an interesting guy, and he's a true music fan. He likes all kinds of music, and he knows so much, man. He's just, he's living history.
He's a living legend for sure, man.
He's done so much.
So your record label started with living with your parents, and the idea came to mind with the record label. And this is a question, I think we're about the same age. And back when I was playing in bands, my youth, we would go to Kinko's to do things, and there was the razor and glue versus Photoshop stuff. And I know you are. So I got to ask you. So obviously Photoshop is much easier, but there's an art form to the old pasting stuff together in transparencies and white paper. And I don't know, man. Tell me your thoughts on these days, like on how zines are, and is there such a thing as a zine anymore? When was the last time you saw a zine?
Just a couple of hours ago, I was at a zine library here in Austin, Texas. I went out to dinner with 2 friends and a person that I just met today, and this woman said, I have a zine library. It's at my house. It's open to the public 7 days a week. I said, I'd like to see that.
Wow.
And she just showed me her zine library. And I went to a zine convention here in Austin about a month ago. There are still a lot of zines out there. It's not all internet. I mean, I thought the internet would have killed print by now, but people still seem to love the feel and the look of paper. And I'm conflicted on that because I love to hold a piece of paper in my hand, too. I love to hold a real book. I love to hold a real magazine. But I also feel that at this point, almost everybody in the world is somehow connected electronically. I think that paper products are kind of wasteful. There's a lot of electricity. There's a lot of trees that go into making a zine these days, and maybe it's more ecologically correct to not have fanzines anymore. I hate to say that as much as I love them. Maybe it's time to just put all the content online. Somehow not as special, somehow not as fun, but maybe we should think about the environmental impact for a while, too.
That's an interesting statement right there, coming from a guy who has a book that's coming out very shortly.
It's going to be an ebook, too.
and I was going to ask, is it going to be an ebook, but also with your history of podcasting and doing your own radio show. What about an audio version of the book? Are you going to do something that's written, or not written, but spoken?
I would like to do an audio book. I don't know if that's something Microcosm does, but I have a friend who owns a recording studio, and he said, if you want to turn this into an audio book, come down to my recording studio and we'll do it for free. He said, I'll record the whole audio book. I don't know how long that would take. The book itself is about a 7-hour read front to back. To record 7 hours of reading, that could be like 28 hours. I mean, I would do it.
Sure.
It would probably take me a week to do it, but I would do it. If anybody has any interest in releasing an audiobook version of Crate Digger, they should get in touch with me, and then I could run it by my publisher Microcosm and see how they feel about that. But yeah, I would totally be into doing that.
Very cool. I talk with a lot of bands and people within the music industry, and there's the big question is always, within music, it's always, are you doing a CD? Are you doing vinyl? Are you doing digital only? And in your book, Crate Digger, it talks about, back in the day, a punk band, needed to have a vinyl record out in order to have any kind of credibility. So now,
yes,
as an author yourself now, with a book that is, it's pages that you physically flip through, that you read, and if does that give you the credibility as an author? And what about that versus just people who put stuff up into the Amazon cloud, into that atmosphere?
I feel that it gives me credibility and that somebody else is financing it. It's not a vanity press. My own record label, Burrito Records, probably 1/3 of the releases on Burrito Records I played on. So those records, it was very satisfying to be in control of my own releases. But after I closed the label, I put out 3 Murder Suicide Pact records on other labels, and I also found a great satisfaction in that there were other labels that were interested in my work as well. That in some ways, those releases on other labels meant more to me because they weren't vanity pressings. And the fact that I found a publisher who believed enough in doing this book that he's committing a lot of time and money to it. Microcosm agreed to publish this book. I got a contract after I started talking to this guy. An hour or two after I talked to this guy, I had a contract in my computer. I said, you want to read the whole book first? And he said, no. He said, so the 2 sample chapters you sent me were great. I know who you are. I know what you've done in music, and I know this is going to rock. So here's your contract. And by the time, months later, I think I signed the contract in February of 2014, and I didn't get out to Portland to visit Microcosm until August of 2014. And even all those months later, when I got out there, Joe, who owns Microcosm, still hadn't read the whole book. And I went out there to do the final edit, and he said, okay, I've only read about half your book. So I sat and we read the second half of the book together, word for word. He's like, oh my God, this story's good. This story's good. I didn't know it was going to go there. And he said, I had no idea it was such a rich story when I sent you the contract. He says, this is going to be a really good book, and they're going to push it really hard.
That's incredibly awesome. So, being a music historian, how important is preserving punk rock music history to you? And it's twofold, Bob. And how do you feel about today's quote unquote punk music? And I know that you may not even know, but since you don't listen to it, but go with that thought.
It is incredibly important to preserve, I think, all history, not just punk rock music, but any kind of music, all kinds of subcultures. I love the idea of documentation. I love the fact there are libraries. I never feel better than when I'm walking around inside of a library and saying, this is a repository of history and information, and I love that. And I did a lot of archiving for many years, and I've written a lot of articles about the history, particularly of Florida punk, and I've opined on a lot of blogs and web pages about some bands and some records that I'm knowledgeable about, and I'm glad that all that information has been preserved. I feel like I don't physically need to own a zillion records in my living room anymore. Other people are doing a better job at it. Maximum Rock and Roll is like the Library of Congress of punk rock, When I thought that I had a badass record collection until I went to Maximum Rock and Roll, and then I realized, I was collecting all these records because I thought they were historically important besides being kick-ass music. But Maximum Rock and Roll has a far more complete collection, and so do many other collectors. The music has been preserved, and there are physical copies all over the place. They're not going away, and the digital thing has just been fantastic. So even if every single copy of the first Roach Motel record suddenly disappeared, there would be digital copies of it all over, and I love that. I love the preservation of this history because I think punk rock is a subculture. I think it's history, and I think it's important to save these things. And as far as new music these days, I don't think that punk rock died like a lot of people our age think punk rock died in 1986 or whatever year. No, I think punk rock's still going, and I think there are a lot of new bands that are just as good. Some of them might even be better than some of the bands that people hail as gods. And if you or somebody is not personally into punk rock anymore, don't be a jaded dickhead and spoil it for everybody. Don't be a spoil sport. If the party's over for you, go home. There's a lot of other people still enjoying the party. And sometimes I'm at a punk show and I'll get caught up in a new band that kicks ass, and I'll start laughing and smiling and I'll dance a little bit. And if I'm at a punk show and I feel like I'm not fitting in, I'm not having a great time, I'll bail early so I'm not a buzzkill. And I think it's really important for young people to respect the past and to know who the germs are and to know who Minor Threat is. And I think it's also important for older people, if they still want to be involved in the punk scene, to still pick up on new bands, to go see new bands, to go pick up new records. If you consider yourself a member of the punk scene, you should try to stay current. And if you're an young member of the punk scene, you should try to learn your history a little bit too. It goes both ways.
Sound advice from a man who had the sound idea. Speaking with Bob Suren. Bob, I want to thank you for your time, man. And the book is coming out in May. Is that what you said? Yes?
I think the release date is June 1st. I think they get printed in April. I think they'll be sitting in a warehouse until June 1st when they get shipped.
So Microcosm, is that .com?
Microcosmpublishing.com. You could search for it there. It's right on their homepage. Or you could type in Bob Suren Crate Digger to Google and it'll come right up. The Amazon page will come right up. It's also on Books A Million. It's going to be all over the place. They've got good distribution.
Are you going to do any sort of book tour once the book is out and available?
Yeah, I plan on doing a two-pronged book tour. I plan on doing East Coast and Midwest, and then I plan on doing West Coast.
Well, I definitely hope to see you.
I'm going to promote this as hard as I can because I think as far as creative projects go, it's the most important thing that I've ever put my name on. If people 5, 20, 100 years from now remember me for anything, this is the thing I want them to remember me for, is for this book and not some record that I played on. The records are cool too, but this book I think has been the culmination of the last 30 years. Whereas those records were like a slice of time. That's what I did in 1993. I was doing this. This book is what I did from 1983 until 2013. And I'd rather have somebody read that book than pick up one of my old records.
30 years ago when you began this obsession with punk records, I'm sure that at that time you probably told anybody who would listen that I'm going to be punk rock forever, man. And did you really, now 30 years later, can you really believe that it's still indeed true? Because you believe that when you're young, but life happens and things change. And
I still have all the ideals of punk rock. All the big ideas I still think are incredibly important. I never really dress that punk. I dress probably more mainstream than most people would guess. Most people don't think I look like a punk. They think I look like a geometry teacher or something. But the big ideas about punk rock will always be really important to me. And even if I never listen to a punk rock record again, I'll always think punk. I'll always look at the world through punk rock glasses and think, is this the right thing to be doing? And that's been punk's true success, has not been all the great records. And they are great. The real death of punk rock, the real lasting impact punk rock, has been all the minds that it has shaped. It is way more important. The ideas behind those Crass records and those Dead Kennedys records are way more important than the guitar riffs, any day. That's what, to me at 45 years old, that's how I view the value of punk rock is the way it has shaped the world one person at a time.
Punk has always been more than just music. It's an ideology and it's a lifestyle for many. And just like you say, putting the thought into it and living the life through those ideals, it's shaped you. Crate Digger, an obsession with punk records, available coming up in June from Microcosm Publishing, microcosmpublishing.com. Bob Suren, man, thank you so much for taking the time. And go take a look on facebook.com/Bob Suren. Or
just type in Bob Suren at the top thing, and you'll find me. There's only two of us. But thank you very much, and maybe we'll do this again. Maybe once the book is out, maybe when I make it to Florida on the book tour, maybe I'll have a couple of hours and we'll do something live on your show.
Well, I'm just down the street from your old place when you lived down here. So, yeah, it was great to talk to you again, too, Bob.
Great. Thanks a lot, man. All right, take care.